Well, welcome, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, our country is being torn apart by a couple of radical groups. And I go back to the founding of America. Our founding fathers, Madison and Hamilton and Adams and George Washington, all were strongly against what would happen when a mob began to deal in an unreasoned thrust against the government. They all felt it was a problem that would happen to America if a group came together, unreasoned, unfeeling, and moved by animal passions, and it came together to destroy the government. That is what we're facing right now. But we showed you yesterday about Antifa. Antifa is not just some indigenous group. It came from Germany. It was a protest against the Nazis, but it is anarchist. They want to destroy everything. And the idea of defunding the police, that's Antifa. The idea of tearing stuff down, that's Antifa. They are total anarchists. They want to destroy everything. And it's not some innocent indigenous movement. This is clearly organized. They have chapters, and the whole game is to destroy the fabric of American society. But there's another organization you've heard a lot about. It's called Black Lives Matter. It's one of the most popular phrases in America today. And the mantra for the protest movement ignited by the murder of George Floyd and other tragic killings by police. But who's behind an organization called Black Lives Matter? And what does this organization really stand for? You're going to be shocked when we tell you the truth. Gary Lane brings us this stunning expose.
After the death of George Floyd in the custody of the Minneapolis police, the Black Lives Matter movement and the Maine organization have exploded into greater national prominence and gained a very wide following.
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
The movement consists of many organizations, including the original Black Lives Matter group. On its website, it lists many goals, the majority of which most people would support, like we work vigorously for freedom and justice for black people, and by extension, all people. But despite such mainstream ideas, leaders of Black Lives Matter come from a far-left point of view.
Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
The group takes positions many Americans would find very controversial, like its view of the traditional family, saying we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages. Positions like those are why many black Americans, including Christians who support racial justice, oppose the organization's goals. Black Christian pro-life speaker and author Ryan Baumberger has written top 10 reasons I'll never support the Black Lives Matter movement.
They're radically pro-abortion. I mean, this is a movement that announced solidarity with the abortion industry. Back in 2015, there's actually a solidarity statement standing behind the abortion industry, standing with Planned Parenthood. So how can you say the Black Lives Matter on one hand and then partner with the leading killer of black lives?
Former Republican Congressman Lieutenant Colonel Alan West disagrees with the idea that police are committing mass attacks on black Americans, and it's a distraction from the issue of black abortion.
Black Lives Matter in the media wants us to believe it's a genocide out there. The real genocide is the 20 million unborn black babies have been murdered in the womb since 1973.
In addition to its support for non-traditional families, the group also strongly believes in gay rights, saying, we foster a queer-affirming network.
The Black Lives Matter movement heavily promotes homosexuality and transgenderism. They want to do away with heteronormative thinking. Well, we see what happens when we do away with God's framework of family, of a married mother and a father, and it leaves behind vulnerable communities which suffer so many negative outcomes.
West believes the organization is simply another far-left group, speaking to it directly in a recent video.
Because you don't stand for anything except the same old white progressive socialist ideological agenda that we will have nothing to do with.
And Baumberger points to another key problem from a biblical perspective.
They have no forgiveness, no reconciliation. There's no call for that. So as a Christian, When our salvation is predicated on reconciliation, being reconciled to God, how can we not be reconciled to one another?
With the number of high-profile deaths of black Americans while dealing with police in recent years, and especially after the killing of George Floyd, it's easy to see why so many Americans are embracing the idea that Black Lives Matter. But if they take a closer look at the positions of the Black Lives Matter organization itself, they might rethink their support for that group. Gary Lane, CBN News.
Don't be a part of sheep. But to think of those women, they said, we are trained Marxists. We are trained. These are three of those women started Black Lives Matter. Two of them said, we're trained in Marxist ideology. What is Marxism? It is communism. What is communism? It has to do with all the things that we have been against over the years. And the United States has been standing up against communism. And these people are, like the Antifa, they're nihilists, they're anarchists, they want to destroy everything that we believe in, and so they're going around tearing down statues, and it's now so indiscriminate that they don't even know who they're tearing down. For example, they're going after the statue of not of Confederate leaders, but of Union officers who fought the Confederacy. They don't even know what's happening. It's blind rage, now undisciplined rage, trying to destroy this nation of ours and rename things, take down statues of Christopher Columbus, rename the capital of Ohio, and on it goes. Why? Because they will destroy the fabric of this nation, and the game plan of the anarchists is to set one class against another, to start the people fighting each other. That's what's been happening. And don't be sucked into it. You know, it sounds so noble, but it isn't noble at all when you've got three people who start something with that name and who are acknowledged Marxist revolutionaries. Well, in other news, since George Floyd's brutal murder, Americans have been clamoring for police reforms. Now it looks like that move is all but dead in Washington. Why? John Jessup has that story.
Thanks, Pat. The Republican police reform bill dead on arrival. Senate Democrats blocked debate Wednesday on a bill that aimed to change key parts of the criminal justice system. Democrats said it didn't go far enough, but Republicans said it was just politics. Jenna Browder brings us that story.
According to recent polls, most Americans think some sort of police reform needs to happen. But with House Democrats introducing their bill and Senate Republicans theirs, meeting in the middle now seems near impossible.
Well, I hope none of you are falling for this nonsense that somehow our Democratic colleagues would be disadvantaged by getting on the bill.
It was a showdown in the U.S. Senate.
Now, the Senate Republican Justice Act is lacking in substance and will not make the reforms needed to stop police brutality.
Senate Democrats refusing to sign on to the bill because they say they want more sweeping change than the Republican Justice Act calls for. For example, a provision that would hold officers liable to damages in lawsuits and other accountability measures. Republicans say they would have a chance to amend the bill if they would allow debate on it. But Democrats don't trust that promise.
But I, for one, do not intend to be played.
You gotta be kidding me.
Senator Tim Scott wrote the bill.
Because the who matters. They cannot allow this party to be seen as a party that reaches out to all communities in this nation.
He accused Democrats of punting on the issue until after the election and abusing what he calls their monopoly on black voters.
And no matter the loyalty of the people, the return they get will always continue to go down, because in monopolies, you start devaluing your customer.
Senator James Langford co-sponsored the bill.
We were 4 votes short of opening debate to discuss it. Every single Republican voted for this, and a handful of Democrats, but the vast majority of Democrats actually said no. We don't want to debate this bill. We will only debate the Pelosi bill when it comes out of the House. Well, that's absurd.
Meanwhile, loved ones are burying victims of police-involved shootings. In Atlanta, Rayshard Brooks' family said their final goodbyes. He was shot after resisting arrest outside a Wendy's restaurant. But in Washington, stalemate and failure are the order of the day, with Lankford blaming Democrats for the Republican bill's failure.
We've been through this journey so many times where we'll see a black man be killed, and we'll all watch the footage, and the whole country rises up, and Congress starts debating, and then it stops. And it stops because of silly stuff like this.
And the House is expected to pass its police reform bill today, but Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has already given it a thumbs down. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Jenna. Pat, yesterday's move in the Senate is seen as pouring cold water on momentum that had been building for reform.
Well, they don't want reform. They want a political issue. And you just remember this Antifa, defund the police. And now, if the Democrats go into the election standing for that principle, we want to defund the police. And this whole police reform bill has to, in its foundation, has that defunding concept of Antifa, this radical group. That the idea is we're going to limit the police, and we're going to limit them severely, and you Republicans can't talk about it because we need a campaign issue. I think the American people have got to be smarter than this. And, you know, if you are given a sucker deal, you don't want to keep buying it. And we are trying to, these radical groups are trying to lead us around by the nose, destroy our society, destroy our leadership, destroy the people who we have honored. And they're not really dealing with the problem that exists in the world, which is 1 million people being trafficked, that sort of thing. That's what really is the major problem. They're not dealing with that. It's a campaign issue, and I'm sick of it, and you should be too. We should vote for people to get into office who care about America, care about all of us, and are not trying to get partisan advantage over one another with this nonsense, and that's what we're dealing with. John?
Pat, a federal appeals court has ordered the criminal case against President Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, to be dismissed. The court, by a vote of 2-1, ruled that the Justice Department's move to abandon the case settled the issue.
He's been exonerated, and I want to congratulate him. He's been through a lot.
Flynn had pled guilty to 2 counts of lying to the FBI about phone calls to Russia's ambassador before President Trump took office, but changed his plea after new evidence came to light, along with hiring a new attorney. That's the time at which the Justice Department decided to drop its case. Well, it has been nicknamed the Godzilla dust cloud. An enormous plume of dust from the Sahara is blanketing the Caribbean, heading toward Florida, as you can see in these national satellite images from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Air quality across most of the region hit hazardous levels, and people are being warned to stay indoors. One environmental specialist calls it, Pat, the most significant event in the past 50 years.
You know, folks, you want to draw some sort of biblical parallel to what's going on. We've got a plague of locusts sweeping across a good part of Africa and now moving into parts of the Middle East. With their presence comes famine. We've got the coronavirus that's wreaking havoc all across the nation. I just read that Brazil now may be leading the number of cases of corona infection that is destroying populations. And the economies of the world tottering. And now comes this enormous dust storm out of Africa, and it's coming across, and it'll gum up everything. And on top of that, you've got the ring of fire exploding, and there's some volcanoes going up, and the earthquakes we're looking at, undersea earthquakes and also on-land earthquakes. The ring of fire, the tectonic plates beginning to move. If I were you, I think I would get hold of the Lord and ask God for his mercy, because some bad things seem to be happening on earth, not to mention the fact of all this revolution we're seeing in the civil political realm that we're dealing with.